Something, Hanley?
Yeah, something. Something like a lot of men out of work.
That, unfortunately, is progress, Hanley. You know you're a solid man when it comes to assembly line planning, but when it comes to the aforementioned progress, you're a foot dragger.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Twilight Pwn, a podcast that discusses each and every episode of the Twilight Zone. My name is John. I'm joined this week by Fred.
Hello.
This week we're changing things up. We have been going chronologically, but we took a leap forward. Instead of doing the fourth episode of the series, we're going to do the 153rd, which aired near the end of the fifth and final season of the Twilight Zone. That episode is the classic, much talked about, The Brain Center at Whipple's, originally broadcast May 15th, 1964.
These are the players, with or without a scorecard. In one corner, a machine. In the other, one Wallace v. Whipple, man. And the game? It happens to be the historical battle between flesh and steel. Between the brain of man and the product of man's brain. We don't make book on this one and predict no winner. But we can tell you that for this particular contest, there is standing room only in the Twilight Zone.
I'm not sure that there is standing room only in this corner of the Twilight Zone. I think most of the people are kind of, focusing on the better episodes.
Yeah. Do you want to go first this week?
All right, I'll try and get through this.
Okay,
So
this is our own particular introduction to this episode, written in the classic Serling style.
Enter one Wallace v. Whipple, that perfect embodiment of capitalism. Ruthlessly efficient, borderline competent, and the obvious product of nepotism. While Whipple withholds wages from his workers, one wonders whether Whipple would waffle or whimper if Whipple not his workforce was whittled away. Whither Whipple? We will watch when we Twilight Pwn.
Reminds me of what would Vim Vendors do? The human mind has conjured up all manner of wonder. The television, the nuclear submarine, the automatic umbrella. But for every miracle do we lose a man? Are we moving all too fast towards a world where factory workers are replaced by giant boxes with lights on them, and factory managers are replaced by cartoonish robots? Tonight we'll find out in the Twilight Zone.
Good. A little bit of a spoiler alert in there.
Oh, yeah, too bad.
Yeah.
And what a spoiler it is, and what a twist old Whipple has up his sleeve. Like we always say, these episodes are available on Netflix, and we're kind of assuming that you've checked it out beforehand. We've got a factory called Whipple's, run by the Wallace B. Whipple mentioned in the introduction, and he's making all kinds of changes at the plant to replace workers with machines, and naturally the workers aren't too happy about it, and that situation escalates and escalates and escalates until we get one of the finest twists in Twilight Zone history. You know what my very first note on this thing I wrote down, that it opens up with this movie. Whipple has filmed a movie of himself explaining the changes that are going to be going to be going down at the factory.
Right.
My very first note was, opens just like Citizen Kane.
Citizen Whipple.
Every bit is good. It's funny too. I also had this thought. This film is him explaining, presumably to the stockholders of the Whipple company, the changes that are going to be happening, the machines he's going to be using to replace the workers. And I just kind of had the thought, why is this a movie?
Pre-PowerPoint days.
True.
Newsreels were kind of the way to go.
It was also funny too because he was playing this, movie explaining all these changes that were happening at the plant, and he was watching it with his chief engineer. And
right.
At the end of that movie, the chief engineer is like, so this is what you're going to do. It's like, probably your chief engineer would probably know about that stuff.
I found it more amusing where the thrust of the movie was clearly, I'm about to fire everyone, and then Whipple turns to his chief engineer and is like, pretty good stuff, huh?
Yeah.
Or like he gets all disappointed that the chief engineer isn't excited.
I know. That's one of the weakest things about this episode is how weirdly Whipple is written as a character. You know what I mean? Sometimes he kind of seems like he's on the ball, and then other times he just seems dumb. I don't know. What was your feeling about that?
Yeah, I mean, the Whipple was just poorly written, poorly acted, top to bottom.
Yeah, pretty much.
I actually wrote the note, Mr. Whipple doesn't seem like an actor. Like, the person playing him just didn't feel like a professional actor.
The opening scene is Whipple explaining how he's going to... I don't remember how many jobs he's getting rid of, but he's getting rid of a lot of jobs at this central plant that manufactures a product. It's never explained what the product is.
I believe it's Whipjits.
Right, yeah, clearly. I did think it was funny how, like, it's Whipple's factory and the classic, business school example of a generic product is widgets. Do you think that was, like, intentional, or?
I think Serling just was sitting around one day having a smoke, and the name Wallace v. Whipple popped in,
Yeah.
and he speed dictated this story out in about 10 minutes.
It was funny how they went to, like, great lengths to not say what product they were manufacturing. I don't know if you...
Right.
I get why they were doing it, because they were trying to make the story more of, a general universal thing, but it is funny just because at several points they really have to stretch the dialogue to get around it. He's like, I'm interested in product and getting it out there. All these products. We got to produce these products. And then he's explaining what the machines do that he's using to replace his workers, and he's like, these machines are capable of cutting, lathing, stretching. Like, it's just like, right, so what are you making?
This is our first encounter with Serling appearing in person to give his introduction.
True, yeah. Relatively naturally this time. The cut around to Serling is pretty natural.
Right. It's kind of a whip pan.
It's a Whipple pan. It was fairly natural.
Yeah. It was one of the few natural touches of this episode.
I think this episode was written by Serling, and, as you know, I like to point out whenever I can where you can really tell that it was written by Serling.
Oh, this episode had a lot of that.
Yeah.
I made a note.
I mean, pretty much the entire episode was kind of written in the classic Serling style. But, one thing that he really likes to do is sort of throw in more words than are necessary in a sentence. Like,
right.
The first time that I noticed it was when Mr. Whipple says, when it comes to the aforementioned progress, you're a foot dragger. It's kind of like, why didn't you just say, when it comes to progress, you're a foot dragger?
Whipple said something to the effect of, I'm going to indulge in some of that heartfelt compassion that you hunger for.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like, well, I don't even...
Yeah, is that even English?
Yeah, I don't know how to pare that down because I don't know what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. I would ridicule this, but I don't want to do the grammar map.
Right.
Don't want to map out the sentence. I think in Serling's defense, if any character deserves to be sort of overwritten, this Whipple character, he's like a bureaucrat. Maybe it sort of makes sense for him to throw in a lot of silly, management doublespeak, but it definitely goes pretty far overboard in this episode.
Well, and I'm not sure that this actor is the most natural choice for the person to do Serling dialogue. I actually have a clip.
Young man, your presence here is a necessity of the moment. Notice I stress of the moment. A case in point. Case in point. Stay here. Observe this.
It was a good idea to keep that take.
Yeah, the first half was pure Serling. The second half was pure Whipple.
Yeah, totally. So after this chief engineer and Whipple have this discussion about how the changes that are going to be made at the plant, naturally the chief engineer is none too thrilled about it. Whipple brings in, I guess he's a foreman, and
right. And Hanley is the chief engineer,
right.
And Dickerson is the foreman.
Right, played by Ted DeCorsia, who we saw in the last episode we did.
16mm Shrine.
16mm Shrine. He's really Serling whenever he needed someone to yell. Basically, Ted DeCorsia was like his go-to uncouth yeller, basically.
Right.
Ted, you're gonna have to come out of retirement. I got a drunken monologue. Anyway, so he brings in Ted DeCorsia and lets him know his proletariat services will no longer be required.
The foreman's gotten kind of drunk, and he comes back to the place at night.
Yeah,
just kind of to. I think his original instinct might have been to just tell off Whipple.
Yeah,
he's expressed earlier his disdain for the machine.
Yeah.
Ever notice, Mr. Hanley? Ever notice how it looks like it had a face? Ugly face. A miserable, ugly face.
Probably was a line taken directly from the cutting room floor of 16mm Shrine.
It sounds exactly. You think you're the number one machine on the top of the heap, but you're just a lousy bucket of bolts. It's too bad, too, that we don't have a visual because the machine does have, like, a little bit of a face. I don't know if you saw that, but it's like a smiley face. It's like...
No, I specifically chose that. For people who want to see, it'll be up on our website where you can download the show, too, which is twilightpwn.libsyn.com. And it is ridiculous. There's basically, they put a little separate piece of, like, a light bright, and they put a smiley face on there.
I know. He's like
blinking on and off.
I know. He's just giving the speech about how did you ever see how there's a face glaring back at you from behind the cold mind of machine, and it's like an emoticon. Like,
yeah, this horrible, ugly face. It's just like what a 5-year-old would draw. Yeah. So he comes back, and Whipple confronts him, and they have some of the biggest acting I've ever seen at each other. Yes. It's basically just two people screaming at the top of their lungs.
Yes, and looking right into the camera, I might add, too, which makes it really uncomfortable to watch. It's funny. Do you have a clip?
Yeah, I couldn't resist. Yeah. So, and bear in mind, the original clip was probably about 2 minutes straight, so I did whittle it down because it was just preposterous, but here we go.
Somebody ought to held you down and put a bit in your head and poured in some reminders that men have to eat and work. And you can't pack them in cosmoline like surplus tanks or put them out to pasture like old bulls. I'm a man, Mr. Whipple. You hear me? I'm a man.
Oh, God, it's so
and that makes me better than that hunk of metal, you hear me? Better!
Oh, God. It makes the speech in Network about I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it seem like a polite request. It's so over the top.
It's just so amazing.
You have to keep in mind that, like, the guy who's Ted DeCourcy, the actor who's delivering that monologue, is looking right at the camera, and it's like 2 feet away from him, and it like a vein on his head is about to explode.
So then he swings an axe or something. He starts trying to destroy the machine, and Whipple and the security guard come down. And I don't know if you had this. Whipple pulls a gun on him, tries to get him to stop. The guy doesn't. And so Whipple shoots him, and this is another one where you really just need to see the episode.
What?
I was not clear in any way if the bullet hit the guy based on his reaction.
Are you kidding me? That's so weird. On the Netflix version of it, there's just a really awkward cut right there.
Really?
Yeah, that's actually really crazy because I was wondering, like, basically in the Netflix version, Ted DeCourcy is at the end of his screaming monologue, and it like cuts to Whipple kind of like with an angry face, and then it cuts forward like in a really awkward jump cut, and the chief engineer is talking to Whipple, being like, "You're lucky that guy didn't die." And I was wondering, like, they must have cut a scene there or something like that.
Oh man! After the guy's been shot, okay, he is still alive, and he's on the ground, and he says something to the effect to the machine, like, "But it didn't take me down." Which he does the raging bull. He says, the never got me down Ray to the machine.
Whipple and the chief engineer are sort of having it out about the foreman getting shot, and the chief engineer is, having none of Whipple's arguments about progress and things like that, and Whipple...
It's just progress, Fred. Yeah. I gotta kill all my workers. That's the natural flow of capitalism.
I know. So then the chief engineer decides he's going to quit, but he's not going to go out without a bang. So he, slaps Whipple, reads Whipple the riot act and the Wyatt act,
the Whipple act.
Weeds. Anyway, so then Whipple is kind of finally alone with his machines, except for a technician, right?
I don't think they give him a name, but
yeah.
And we start getting some kind of passage of time cuts.
Yeah.
And you see Whipple, the plant is getting increasingly automated, and Whipple just keeps looking at more and more pictures of machines while getting sweatier, which basically Whipple just starts looking at machine porn.
Yeah, totally. The classic Twilight Zone time passage, a character getting sweatier.
He definitely did. It reminded me of Mr. Death.
Yeah, in One for the Angels, totally. I did think that montage was like maybe one of the, semi-decent directorial moments in the episode, just because it's when he flips the switch on the machine and all the cars in the parking lot disappear, and he flips a switch and all the people in the cafeteria disappear. I mean, It's not like so brilliant, but it was a nice little... It was a decent montage.
It was a nice break from all the screaming.
Exactly. When I say it was nice, I don't mean that it was well made or well crafted. I just mean I was glad not to have someone yelling at me. So finally, Whipple's kind of pared it down to essentially him, a room full of giant graphing calculators, and one technician who he's really riding hard trying to make him do checks on the machine every hour or something. And then the technician gives him a speech that he's sick of, even the technician is sick of the machines, and he thinks it's ridiculous to do checks every hour, and he's, the place is missing the human touch.
Whipple and the technician have it out, and it is just very strange that the technician would be so anti-machines.
I know.
Since that's what he clearly got his postgraduate work in. That's everything he's been training for. And now he's just like, I don't know, Whipple.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I know. It really kind of spins on a dime very casually, too, because at the very end he's like, I don't really like working here that much. There's too many machines.
The technician exits on one of the best pwnings we've seen so far.
And another thing, Mr. Whipple, having to do with equipment checks and preventive maintenance. Well, I think it might be a good idea if you ran an equipment check on yourself.
Pwned!
Yeah, totally pwned.
And the only bit more ridiculous than that line...
Equipment check on myself. But insufferable rot. Equipment check on myself.
Classic Serling repeating what was just said before in a different tone of voice. You know, he's alone in this room with all these machines in this sort of control center. One might say the brain center. And the episode forgoes any kind of slow escalation or build. They just all start going crazily right away. All the machines just immediately go haywire. It sort of sounds like a Skrillex song. All the machines are going off and whirring, and they're somehow playing back clips of all the people who have yelled at Whipple over the course of the episode. Then there's a cutaway, and Whipple's in the same bar where the foreman went to go drown his woes, and he kind of slinks in, and he's looking sweaty. Big change there. And looking kind of out on his luck. He sees no one else but the chief engineer. They have, kind of casual conversation about how things are going. And then it slowly gets revealed that, Whipple's not here for a drink. He's actually been fired from his job as chairman of the board of Whipple Enterprises. Right. And the reason why is because the board has said that Whipple has been warped by spending all this time with those machines. He then delivers another angry monologue. This episode just doesn't have enough of them. But how can they replace us all with machines? You know, the bitter irony, of course, is that he was the one who was doing that. And then we cut away.
bitter
Yeah,
irony.
The incredibly clever irony that no one saw coming. And then we cut away to potentially the most ridiculous shot that we've seen in the Twilight Zone yet, which is that the board of Whipple Enterprises thought that, the CEO, Wallace B. Whipple, was getting warped by working too much with machines, so they've replaced him with Robbie the Robot from Austin Space. And Robbie the Robot is in the brain center at Whipple's, and he's spinning his watch around just like Whipple used to do throughout the entire episode.
Just saying it sounds like that can't be right.
Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of saying it sort of slow and hesitantly, like maybe it was different on the original DVD. Maybe there's another difference there. Maybe
maybe Netflix has it screwed up.
Yeah,
John, what happened at the end of your episode?
Yeah. The funny thing too is that it's just such it's like the worst transition in terms of tone, because Whipple is giving the speech that is like all about the dignity of the human spirit, and they can't do this to us. And then it cuts away and it's like, there's a robot in my job. Like it's just the least smooth transition.
I felt like tone was just kind of a mess in this one. When you hear the title Brain Center at Whipple's, you think this is going to be one of Serling's lighthearted ones.
Yes, right.
But then all the writing and performance, by and large, is more of one of Serling's social commentary pieces, and it's extraordinarily serious and all yelled,
But then he still ends on like a whimsical, wacky ending.
I know.
It's such a mess.
I know. The tone is probably maybe the worst thing about the episode.
I was watching the episode kind of trying to guess what the twist would be.
Yeah.
And I did not guess this twist.
Yeah.
But as soon as it happened, think I didn't guess this twist because I was so disappointed when I saw it. I was like, that is the 100% most obvious thing it could be. I assumed they maybe would have tried a little harder.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like a classic thing of like, did I expect this twist exactly? No. Does that make it a good twist? Also no. You know? Right. It's just handled in the most rushed, crazy way. Like, you could imagine the first 10 minutes of the episode are Whipple firing everybody, and then he's alone in this factory with his machines, and then slowly they start to get a little crazy and kind of drive him crazy, and it builds and builds and builds until at the very end he's like, stuck in this room and he can't get out, and there's no one to help him because he's fired all his people. And, not that would be like so brilliant, but that would at least be, that would kind of make sense. And instead they just cut through any building of tension of the machines driving him crazy, and they just all go off at the very end all at once. Right. It's like they just, spend all their money in one big fireworks display.
Robbie was free. They'd worked with him in the past.
Yeah.
He was a good get.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Something for the kids. Little cherry on top for the kids. When Rod Serling first started making the Twilight Zone, at least the official explanation is that he was writing plays for TV that were more straight ahead, but he was constantly getting censored because of the social commentary he wanted to make. And so he thought, this is a very classic thing for writers to do, is that if he puts his story in a, fantasy world, then he'll be able to get away with saying all the things he really wants to say about the world as it is now.
Right.
And in the best episodes of The Twilight Zone, the marriage between social commentary and, something fantastic or magical or science fiction-y works well. And in this, it's like both of those elements, neither one of those elements makes the other one better. You know what I mean? Right. It's like there's nothing really magically real or magical or science fiction about this episode until the very end, which is utterly ridiculous. Right. And it basically could have just been any, a standard boilerplate episode of any show until the very end. And then you're just like, oh, that's lame.
Yeah. There were some reviews on IMDb drew comparisons between this episode and a teleplay that he wrote 10 years before or more called Patterns, which is actually considered, one of the great episodes of Golden Age of television. Have you ever seen that?
No, I saw that comparison too. I looked up a little bit about Patterns. It seemed like it was more of like a human drama, not so much like something about replacing workers in factories. But I think that it's possible.
And at the end of Patterns, instead of Robbie the robot, it's actually the Gorn from Star Trek has taken the job.
Exactly.
I wonder if it was prescient or if even then everyone kind of basically since the era of the Industrial Revolution, people kind of realized, yes, machines replace labor.
Yeah.
But,
John Henry is the, it's a very old story, and it's basically exactly the same thing, except John Henry at the end of it isn't replaced by Robbie the Robot.
I stumbled upon a gem of a website called Free Market Movie Reviews, whose raison d'etre is to analyze Twilight Zone episodes and popular movies through the prism of free market capitalism and explain why they're wrong.
Yeah. And the guy wrote a review of this episode, obviously a very disparaging episode because it's, commie trash. And then he revisited his post 2 years later or something like that to reaffirm that it was bad.
Right. He makes a note basically like, I've tried to let it go, but it's still bothering me that Whipple's out there. People might be buying this Whipple garbage.
Yeah. For the past 2 years, I've been looking for a place in my soul to forgive Rod Serling. The brain center Whipples, and I just can't do it. What's funny is that this episode really, neither side, makes a good case. I mean, we know where Serling's heart lies. I mean, he's clearly on the side of, the worker and not replacing everybody with machines. But he just doesn't make a convincing argument either way. And at the end, you're not, filled with this, spirit of, damn the man, you're right. But more just kind of like, oh, I guess.
Did you think that the machines were malfunctioning, or did you think there was anything of that was just supposed to be in Whipple's head a bit? Like Whipple had gotten increasingly deranged and obsessed with the machines. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. No, you're right. It probably was meant to be that this is all in Whipple's head. But that, in a way, just negates the whole point of the episode, because it's like, well, the machines are actually, they're doing a better job. It's just that this guy can't handle it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It was all happening in his brain center.
Exactly.
I maybe should have done this a little earlier. This is the first time I felt like it might be worthwhile to capture a little bit of the Serling's clothes.
Oh, yeah, let's check it out.
There are many bromides applicable here. Too much of a good thing, tiger by the tail. As you sow, so shall ye reap.
One in the hand is worth two in the bush.
Exactly.
The robot you know is better than the robot you don't. I don't know. Does any of this stick? Exactly. The story feels a little incoherent. One of these has got to be right?
That's like all Serling, writes in is bromides. Like, that's pretty much his entire writing style is cliches. I don't know. Maybe we're beating too hard on Serling. I mean, this was almost the very end of the Twilight Zone. I mean, he did write a lot of great episodes. It's a little unfair, but
The Obsolete Man is his take on these issues done in a well acted, well put together, well written way.
Yeah.
The only bit of trivia I really had was that it was Robbie, the robot from Lost in Space, which he also appeared in One for the Angels as one of the toys that
Louis Bookman,
Louis
fixture of the side Summer Street.
I think Robbie actually pops in one other episode.
Yeah, I was thinking, well, we could watch that one next. He has an even bigger cameo in that one. If you didn't get enough of Robbie the robot this time around, there's plenty more where that came from.
I picture Robbie in in a Serling's office and then negotiating the deal.
Robbie's got his agent with him. Robbie's got Martin Balsam with him negotiating. Martin Balsam is like, listen, Robbie, you're not getting any younger. It's not the 1930s anymore.
Right.
Look, this part's just a bit part. You play an older robot, okay? But you need this. It's a feature.
So, let's move on to bios of the people.
Yeah.
There's not a ton here this week. Wallace V. Whipple was played by Richard Deacon, who we've kind of been a little harsh on. He was apparently best known for his work on the Dick Van Dyke Show and also Leave It to Beaver. I think he was known as kind of like the uptight straight man comic relief.
Yeah.
And I think in a comedy, I'm sure he is very good in this.
It almost seemed like he just wasn't well rehearsed. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's like we may be coming down on him hard, but I sort of feel like the acting talent. To me, it just felt like he kind of hadn't gotten the rhythm of the words, or the words were hard to say, or something like that. I mean, maybe that is the definition of good acting, but.
Well, no, I do want to talk about that in just a minute. I think that'll connect up in a second. But just to finish up on Richard Deacon, he was not in any other Twilight Zone episodes, but he did appear in an episode of Night Gallery. Trivia for him, he was a gourmet chef who hosted a Canadian TV show on microwave cookery.
Really?
And wrote a companion book.
We'll have to pick it up.
Ted DeCorsia, as we already said, was also in the 16mm Shrine.
Right.
The other actors, they all had long TV careers, and they were great, but it was an interesting bit of casting. The technician was played by an African-American actor, which I'm sure for mid-60s television was a little bit unusual for him. Nothing about that part required his race. It was written just flat, and that's something that's commendable.
Yeah, no,
for
it was
Serling.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. I mean, he was like, delivered the most sensible, sane performance in the entire episode. So you got to give it up to him. Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool too. I mean, I was actually worried when the actor comes in. Was sort of thinking like, oh God, please don't bring race into this. It's so not necessary for this episode.
Right. You're already dropping so many balls.
Exactly.
Don't fumble more.
Yeah, but that was kind of a cool choice. I mean,
Yeah, the actor's name is Thomas Rasulala.
Yeah, and he did this episode under another name. I think he changed his name or something.
As Jack Crowder.
Jack Crowder, right? Yeah.
Touching on what you said, this episode was directed by Richard Donner.
Oh, really? Of the Goonies?
Yes.
Huh.
Big name director. Most famous for the Superman, the original Christopher Reeve Superman series, and for the Lethal Weapon series. But he also did Goonies. He did a lot of movies.
Yeah.
And I was pretty surprised. He did a ton of television like long before he started working in the
In
pictures.
the pictures on the silver screen. Did he directed more episodes of Twilight Zone, right? I feel like I've seen his name before, and I've always wondered whether it was the same Richard Donner.
Yeah, he actually directed 6 of them. I didn't list them all, but among the 6 was, of course, the classic Whipple and the actual classic Nightmare at 20,000 Feet.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's cool. It's interesting.
What you're talking about with Whipple's performance, Richard Donner is more known for big spectacle action movies, and I did wonder, is what's happening here, is this a director who's not as comfortable working with a nuanced, idea piece? Because it seemed like the actor's instincts were to go really big, and he made no effort to restrain them at any point.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's possible. I mean, I never thought of Richard Donner as being like, he's not like Michael Bay or anything like that. I mean, I remember from watching some stuff on the Goonies DVD that he, like really took the time to get to know the actors, and like they all went on vacation together. I mean, we're just pulling at random trivia straws here. This is not really a sophisticated analysis. At every level, there were just many, many mistakes made here. So pretty much
Mistakes were made.
We'll
leave it at that. So IMDb, in its infinite wisdom, rated this episode at a 6.4.
That is the lowest of the episodes we've seen so far, to be fair. So within the scale that we've accepted, that's a pretty, that's a condemnation.
I think we can calibrate that as like the D or the 3 or something of IMDb rating.
Adjust that for Twilight Zone inflation, and we have a real score. It's basically 5 stars to 10, I guess. Yeah, I mean, for me, this was like a 2, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what keeps me from giving it a 1, but it's a 1 or a 2. It's definitely the worst episode we've seen so far. I mean, like, I'm not sure that One for the Angels is like a billion times better, but at least it was kind of fun to watch, and it had some charm to it. This one just makes you feel kind of sad. I don't know.
Yeah, if this one had been whimsy all the way through, the way it you think it's going to be with the title, then it probably would have been about on the same plane as One for the Angels. But as it stands, it's a disjointed mess. It's got the most ridiculous overacting we've seen. So, yeah, it's a 1 or a 2.
Yeah, I'm just going to say 2 because I feel like there's probably a worse episode than this.
Yeah,
and I want to give it to that. I want to give the 1 to that, but this is definitely not higher than 2.
Yeah, we don't want to give it out too early.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess we didn't really rate the twist, but again, same 1 or 2 zone for the twist. Yeah. Did you find an MST3K connection? Because for the first time,
Indeed,
I did not find one.
I kind of skipped over this. Sorry. So Richard Deacon, Mr. Whipple, appeared uncredited. So I had to dig really deep here. I scanned every episode in between here and now. He appeared uncredited as a pilot in the movie This Island Earth.
Oh, really?
Which was featured in Mystery Science Theater, the movie.
So next week, I was thinking of a couple options for next week.
Right.
One is we could watch the other, I think, third and final appearance of Robbie the Robot in the Twilight Zone.
Right.
And then we could also watch another one that sort of touches on similar themes of a human being interacting with a computer, kind of going crazy, but it's just pure whimsy all the way through.
Right, which is the Whipple whims of Wallace B. Winder.
Yeah, exactly.
Next week, we should go ahead and finish off the Robbie the Robot episodes.
Cool.
So that would be Uncle Simon.
Yeah, Uncle Simon.
Which is
written by Neil Simon.
It's also a season 5 episode, so you're in for something good.
Yeah. Season 5, actually, I've been knocking on it. It has some gems. Yeah.
I looked through the list. I mean, Nightmare at 20,000 is there. There's some good ones.
Yeah.
And I did finally look up. It turns out you can watch some of the episodes on CBS Online.
Right.
I don't believe they're all available, but some of them are. So if you're not a Netflix subscriber, that's another outlet to look at.
Yeah. Although now that we've seen that Netflix is cutting scenes out, I don't know if I can Netflix can be trusted.
Right.
Might be missing crucial details of Uncle Simon.
So I think that pretty much winds things down. Fred, did you have anything else?
Nope. I think we've said everything a human being could possibly say about brain center Whipples.
If our Twitter follower or our Facebook friend, if you want to join them, you can follow us on Twitter at Twilight Pwn, PWN, or you can like us on Facebook. And we are listed in iTunes, so if you stumbled upon this somehow or another, if you want, you can subscribe to us in iTunes, get it delivered automatically. And finally, if you have any thoughts or episode requests or anything like that, send us an email at twilightpwn@gmail.com. Fred, have you been able to come up with any other ways for us to have our social media presence?
LinkedIn, maybe?
Yeah.
Good Twilight Zone LinkedIn page, perhaps?
Right. We're always looking for good cross-promotional business opportunities.
Yeah. Be one of our contacts there.
Right.
No, I think that about sums up the 20 ways you can get in touch with us.
All right. Well, Fred, it was good talking to you, and I will see you next week to discuss Uncle Simon.
Sounds good. See you then. Bye, guys.